The day I left that apartment for the last time, I was wearing slippers. My daughter-in-law opened the front door before I could even ring the bell. She opened it faster than usual, which should have told me something. "Mom, could you step outside for a moment?" I didn't understand what she meant at first. Step outside? Go somewhere and come back? I looked at her face. But she wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at the shoe cabinet next to the door, at nothing in particular. Should I bring something back? No, just step outside. That's when I noticed my son behind her. He was sitting on the living room sofa with his head down. He might have been looking at his phone. Or maybe he was just staring at the floor. I couldn't tell. Hyunho. He didn't look up. Hyunho, what did I do wrong? My daughter-in-law took my arm. She didn't grip it hard, she just guided me toward the door. I let myself be pushed. My body felt lighter than I expected. The door closed. I was standing in the hallway in my slippers with nothing in my pockets. No phone, no wallet, no keys. I caught my reflection in the mirror by the elevator, a thin cardigan over my pajamas, hair uncombed. I had just gotten up to use the bathroom and was about to go back to sleep. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Hyunho, at least give me my phone. I heard footsteps inside, but they were moving away, not toward me. That apartment had been mine. To be precise, it had been mine once. My husband and I had bought it together with a mortgage when he was still alive. A decent-sized place, 3 bedrooms. After he died, I transferred it to my name and paid off the loan myself. I handled the cleaning, the repairs, the maintenance fees, all of it. 5 years ago, when my son got married, I signed it over to him. He didn't ask me to. It was my daughter-in-law who brought it up, carefully but clearly. "Mom, we're trying to get a loan, and they say we need collateral. They won't give us much with the apartment in your name." I understood what she was really saying. She wanted the apartment. I asked my son what he thought. "Whatever's easiest for you, Mom." That was his answer. So I signed it over. I even paid the gift tax myself. I had to break open my savings account to do it. With what was left, I bought my daughter-in-law a new bedding set. There was one condition. I would live there until I died. My son nodded. My daughter-in-law smiled and said, "Of course, Mom." That, of course, lasted 5 years. I don't know how long I stood in that hallway. The neighbor's door opened, and a woman in her 40s came out carrying a garbage bag. She saw me and stopped, looking like she wanted to say something. I lowered my head, and she walked past without a word. I knocked again. "Hyunho, I'm cold. Please open the door." It was December. The hallway had no heating, and my feet were going numb. The soles of my slippers were thin as paper. The door opened. It was my daughter-in-law, holding a black plastic bag with something inside. "I put some of your clothes in here. And this." There were some folded bills on top of the bag. She pressed them into my hand. 500,000 won. It should last you a while. "Where's Hyunho?" "Busy." "What about my phone?" "We can't have people calling your number and reaching us. We'll contact you once things settle down." The door closed again. This time, I heard the lock click into place. I took the stairs. I couldn't take the elevator because of the mirror inside. By the time I reached the ground floor, my legs were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from all those stairs. I passed the security booth. The guard was watching TV and didn't notice me. Even if he had, he wouldn't have recognized me. I'd lived there for 5 years. But I'd never gotten to know anyone in that building. I walked out the main entrance and found myself at a crossroads. Left would take me to the bus stop. Right would take me to the subway station. I went left. No particular reason, it was just darker that way. I sat down on the plastic bench at the bus stop. The seat was cold, and I felt the chill seep into my bones almost immediately. I opened the bag. Long underwear, 2 pairs of socks, an old padded jacket. They were mine, but there was no underwear. No toiletries. No phone charger. I counted the money. 10 50,001 bills. A bus came, but I didn't get on. I had no idea where to go. I had no relatives. None that I could contact, anyway. My siblings had either passed away or lost touch with me years ago. My husband's relatives, I hadn't seen them since his funeral. More than 10 years back. I had no friends either. I used to have some, when I was younger. Women I'd worked alongside at the market, neighbors from the apartment complex. But I'd cut them all off when I moved in with my son. I didn't want to be a burden, so I rarely went out. When I watched TV in the living room, I kept the volume low. I ate my meals separately. Because that seemed to be what my daughter-in-law preferred. That's how I spent 5 years. Without a phone, I couldn't call anyone. There was a payphone not far from the bus stop. But I didn't know any numbers by heart. I'd saved everything in my phone. I only remembered one number. My dead husband's. 010-3482-7793. A useless number, but it was all I had. The sun went down. The temperature dropped further, and I pulled the padded jacket out of the bag. The zipper was broken and only went up halfway. I'd meant to throw that jacket away 2 years ago. But my daughter-in-law had left it in a corner of the balcony. A few more buses passed. No one got off, and I was alone at the stop. My shadow stretched long under the streetlight. Looking at it, a strange thought crossed my mind. That shadow looks more solid than I do. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten breakfast. I'd been about to go back to sleep after using the bathroom. There was a convenience store nearby, its lights bright and warm. But I didn't get up. I knew that 500,001 was all I had. Around 9 o'clock, I finally stood up. I couldn't sit there any longer. My backside felt frozen to the seat, and I was losing feeling in my toes. I had to walk. Anywhere. I walked left from the bus stop and came to a row of shops. Half of them already dark. A real estate office, a dry cleaner, a phone store, a noodle shop. Only the noodle shop still had its lights on. Through the window, I could see an elderly man eating ramen. I wanted to go inside. But I didn't. I knew how people would look at an old woman in slippers. Clutching a plastic bag, past the shops, I found a small park. 4 benches, 2 under the streetlights, 2 in the shadows. I headed for the shadows. I sat down. It was a wooden bench, not as cold as the plastic one. I took the long underwear out of the bag and pulled it on under my jacket. I put on both pairs of socks. I was still cold. I looked up at the sky. A few stars were visible, far fewer than I used to see. In the countryside when I was young. That's when I thought of my mother. She'd passed away when I was 32. Before she died, she told me something. Jungim, don't give everything to your children. When you let go of everything in your hands, you become so light that the wind can blow you away. I didn't understand what she meant back then. That night, I slept on that bench. Slept isn't quite the right word. I sat there. Lying down would have made me colder, and I was afraid someone might see me. Around 3 in the morning, the cold became unbearable. My teeth chattered, and I couldn't stop shaking. That's when a thought occurred to me. What happens if I freeze to death here? I wasn't scared, just curious. If I froze to death on this bench, would my son find out? Would he come? Who would handle the funeral? I must have fallen asleep at some point. When I opened my eyes, the sun was up. I tried to move, but my whole body was stiff. My fingers wouldn't straighten, and my knees ached. It took me a long time to stand. The park had people now. Someone exercising, someone walking their dog. A young mother pushing a stroller. None of them looked at me. Even the ones who did wouldn't meet my eyes. I went looking for a bathroom. There was a public restroom at the edge of the park, but it was locked. A sign said it opened at 9. I waited 30 minutes, and when the maintenance woman came to unlock it, I was the first one through the door. I looked in the mirror. I looked worse than I had by the elevator. My hair was tangled, my face swollen. My lips were cracked, my eyes bloodshot. I washed my face with water from the sink. It was cold. I washed my hands too, and tried to smooth down my hair. The woman in the mirror stared back at me. 72 years I'd lived, and I'd never seen such an unfamiliar face. I left the bathroom and returned to the bench. I needed to sit and think. How long could I survive on 500,001? Where should I go? What should I do? But no thoughts came. I just sat there. The sun rose higher, people came and went through the park. And then the sun began to set. I sat on that bench all day. By evening, I was so hungry that I finally went to the convenience store. I bought 2 triangle kimbap for 1,800 won. I ate them standing in a corner of the store. The cashier glanced at me but didn't say anything. That night, I slept on the bench again. The next night too. And the night after that. On the third night, it started to rain. A light drizzle at first, then heavier. There was no shelter above the bench. I got up and walked, looking for somewhere with a roof. Behind the shops, I found a narrow alley. A ledge jutted out between 2 buildings, just enough to keep the rain off. I crouched under it. There was some cardboard there. A large box, folded flat, left by someone. I spread it on the ground and sat on it. The cardboard was damp, but it was better than bare concrete. The rain came down hard. Water flowed into the alley entrance, and I pulled my legs up. My jacket was getting wet, and all I could think was that I couldn't let it get soaked. Without this jacket, I would freeze. That's when I heard it. A whimpering sound. At first, I didn't know what it was. The wind? Something in the drains? It came again. A soft, high whine. I stood up and looked toward the sound. At the end of the alley, next to a trash can, something was there. It was too dark to see clearly, but it was moving. I walked closer. It was a box. A small fruit crate with the lid half open. The sound was coming from inside. I looked in. A dog. A small dog, wet and curled up, trembling all over. Its eyes were large, its fur grayish-white. One ear was folded over, and there was a small wound on its front paw. Our eyes met. The dog didn't run. It didn't bark. It just looked up at me and whimpered. I stood there for a long time. The rain kept falling. The dog kept shivering. I was shivering too. In 72 years, I'd never owned a dog. Taking one in now, in my situation, would have been crazy. But I picked up the box. I don't know why. I just couldn't leave it there. I carried the box back under the ledge and sat down on the cardboard. I opened the box, and the dog looked up at me. I held out my hand, and it sniffed. It didn't bite. I lifted the dog out and tucked it inside my jacket. Its wet body was cold at first. But after a while, I began to feel our warmth mingling together. That night, I huddled in that alley with the dog, waiting out the rain. The dog trembled in my arms for hours, then finally fell asleep near dawn. I slept too. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt warm enough to sleep. When I woke up, the dog was licking my face. The rain had stopped. The sun was out. I looked down at the dog. Its fur had dried and fluffed up overnight. It was smaller than I'd thought, about the size of both my hands together. "What's your name?" The dog wagged its tail. The first time it had wagged its tail. There was nothing around its neck. No collar, no tag. It had clearly been abandoned. I was abandoned too. I said it to the dog. The dog tilted its head, and I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed since being thrown out. 4 days. I looked at the wound on its paw. It was small but still red when it should have been healing. I tore one of my socks and wrapped it around the paw. The dog held still. "You're a good one, aren't you?" I touched its ear, the folded one. It was impossibly soft. "I should give you a name." I thought about it. Whitey? Too common. Fluffy? Its fur wasn't that fluffy. Then I noticed its eyes. Black and round. Like buttons. Button. The dog wagged its tail. "I'll call you Button." That's how Button came to me. Or maybe I was the one who came to Button. The first morning with Button, I went looking for water. I cupped my hands under the faucet in the park restroom, trying to carry some back to her. But it all leaked through my fingers. I tried several times, no use. So I went to the convenience store and bought a bottle of water. 501. I poured some into the bottle cap and set it in front of Button. She started lapping it up, her tiny tongue working slowly. I sat and watched her drink. "Take your time." Button looked up at me, then went back to the water. I was thirsty too. I lifted the bottle and took a sip. Sharing a bottle with a dog a year ago, I never would have imagined it. But it didn't seem strange at all. When the water was gone, Button looked up at me. That look in her eyes, she was hungry. So was I. I went back to the convenience store and bought 2 triangle kimbap. 1,800 won. I ate one and picked the rice out of the other to give to Button. It was tuna mayo flavor. And I remembered hearing somewhere that mayonnaise wasn't good for dogs. So I only gave her the rice. While Button ate, I did some math in my head. 500,000 won, minus yesterday's kimbap at 1,800. Today's water at 500, today's kimbap at 1,800. That left 495,900 won. At 5,000 won a day, I could last 99 days. Not even 100. What happens after 100 days? I decided not to think about it. Getting through today was enough. I took Button to the park and sat on the same bench from the night before. It was daytime now, and people were walking past. 2 elderly women strolled by, saw me, and started whispering to each other. I couldn't hear what they said, but I could read their expressions. That woman must be homeless. I lowered my head. Button squirmed on my lap, wanting to get down. I set her on the grass. She sniffed around, wandered, came back, then sat at my feet. "Button, I used to have a home." She tilted her head. A 3-bedroom apartment. There were plants on the balcony, a sofa in the living room. My husband and I used to sit on that sofa, watching TV and peeling tangerines. Button couldn't have understood, but she looked up at me, wagging her tail softly. That was enough. Having someone listen, I hadn't known how much that could mean. From that day on, I started talking to Button. About anything. The weather, the people passing by, stories from long ago. She never answered, but she always listened. Her ears would perk up, her tail would wag now and then. And sometimes she'd yawn. "Button, it's not as cold today." "Button, that lady's coat is pretty, don't you think?" "Button, are you hungry?" Just a little longer. After I was thrown out, I'd barely spoken. At the convenience store, I'd say, "This one," and nothing else. But with Button around, I found my voice again. I was surprised I still had one. When you don't speak for long enough, I think you forget how. After a week with Button, I learned the rules of living on the street. First, sleep where no one can see you. If people notice, they might report you, chase you off, or worse. I kept using that alley where I'd first found Button behind the shops. Between 2 buildings, under the ledge. Second, leave early in the morning. I had to disappear before the shop owners arrived. I woke at 6 every day and moved to the park before sunrise. Third, use the park restroom or the convenience store. The park restroom was only open from 9 to 6. Outside those hours, I had to use the convenience store. But going in without buying anything felt awkward. So I always bought at least a bottle of water. Fourth, don't look too dirty. If you look like a vagrant, people avoid you, shops turn you away. And the police come around. I washed my face and hands every other day at the restroom, and once a week. I washed my socks and underwear in the sink and hung them to dry. 5th, keep button hidden. Walking around with a dog made me too visible. I found a cloth bag. Someone had thrown away and started carrying Button inside it. She stayed quiet in the bag. Sometimes she'd poke her nose out and sniff, but she never barked. That's how I survived, by making rules and following them. It wasn't easy. Every night was cold. Every day I was hungry. My body ached. My knees hurt the worst. Sleeping on hard ground made them stiff. Every morning I had to rub them for a long time before I could walk. But I kept going. Because of Button. Button never tried to comfort me. She couldn't. She was a dog. She never said, "Stay strong," or "Things will get better." She just stayed close. When I sat on a bench, she sat beside me. When I walked, she followed. When I slept, she curled up against me. That was all. But that was everything. One night in the dead of winter, the cold was brutal. The wind cut through the alley, and even the ledge couldn't keep it out. I layered cardboard beneath me and curled up as tight as I could. My whole body was trembling. I held Button close to my chest. "It's really cold tonight, Button." She whimpered softly. "I'm sorry. I should be keeping you warm." Button burrowed under my chin. I felt her small body radiating heat. I held her tighter. "Button, I thought I was the one who saved you." She licked my face. "But you're saving me, aren't you?" I cried after saying that. The first tears since I'd been thrown out. Not because I was angry, not because I was sad. I think it was because I felt warm. Because this small life was right there beside me. It made me grateful enough to cry. Button licked my tears. They must have tasted salty, but she kept licking. I laughed and cried at the same time. In 72 years, I'd never done that before. About 10 days in, I discovered the market. 20 minutes walk from the park. There was an old traditional market called Junggong Market. Narrow alleys lined with stalls. Women selling vegetables and fruit from low tables. I walked through just to look. That's all I could do, look. I had no money to spend. But at the far end of the market, I noticed some vendors gathered around crates. It was near closing time. And one woman was tossing wilted vegetables into a bin. "Excuse me, are you throwing those away?" She looked at me, looked me up and down. Then nodded. "Yeah, why? You want them?" "Yes." She gave me a strange look but didn't say anything. I took the wilted cabbage and radish and put them in my bag. That evening, I sat in a corner of the park and ate the cabbage. The outer leaves were limp, but the inside was still crisp. I ate it without washing it. The crunch was satisfying. I offered some to Button, but she just sniffed it and turned away. "Not a fan of vegetables, huh?" She looked the other way. I ate the rest myself. After that, I went to the market often. Around closing time, I could always pick up some discarded produce. Wilted greens, misshapen roots, whatever didn't sell. I was embarrassed at first, but after a few days, I got used to it. The vendors started recognizing me. "Oh, you're back? Yes, do you have anything you're throwing out? Take it." That's how I got radish, cabbage, onions, potatoes. I couldn't eat the potatoes raw. So I used the microwave at the convenience store. If I bought a bottle of water and asked, "Can I heat this up?" they usually said yes. I spent less money. With vegetables from the market instead of convenience store kimbap. I could get by on 2,001 a day. Button's food was a problem, though, until I walked past the butcher shop. The butcher was trimming meat, setting aside scraps of fat and gristle. I watched for a while, then asked, "Excuse me, are you going to throw that away?" He looked at me. Then he saw Button in my arms. "For the dog?" "Yes." He thought for a moment, then put the scraps in a plastic bag. And handed it to me. "Take it, no charge." Thank you. I bowed deeply. He waved me off. It's nothing. Go on. That evening, Button ate her fill. I tore the scraps into small pieces, and she gobbled them up. Afterward, she licked my face. She smelled like grease. I laughed and scratched her head. Was it good? Her tail wagged. As I collected vegetables and meat scraps from the market, I started talking to people again. Cold today, isn't it? Sure is. They say it's the coldest winter in years. I believe it. Simple exchanges. Nothing special. But they meant the world to me. To talk to someone, to be seen as a person, I hadn't realized how precious that was. One day, the vegetable vendor asked me a question. Where do you live, anyway? Around here? I couldn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Never mind. I won't pry. She didn't ask again. Instead, she handed me an apple. Here, eat this. It's a little bruised, but it's fine. Thank you. I held the apple against my chest. Button poked her nose up and sniffed. This one's mine. I laughed at her. She wagged her tail, not understanding. That night in the alley, I bit into the apple. It was crisp and sweet. I cut away the bruised part and ate the rest. One bite, then another, slowly. It took me 30 minutes to finish. Button. She looked up. I had an apple today. She wagged her tail. And it was free. I laughed. Here I was, delighted over a free apple. Part of me felt pathetic, but there was no time for self-pity. I was just happy. 2 weeks passed with Button. December was almost over. The end of the year. The streets were crowded, the shops were decorated with lights, and Christmas carols played from somewhere far away. I sat on the bench and watched it all. Young couples holding hands, children tugging at their mothers, elderly pairs walking side by side. Everyone was going somewhere home, to family, to warmth. I had nowhere to go. Button, the new year is coming. She looked up at me. This time last year, I ate dinner with my son and his wife. We grilled meat. My daughter-in-law wrapped it in lettuce for me. Button was quiet. This year, I'm spending it with you. I smiled. I'm not sure if it was bitter or real. But it's better than being alone. Button rested her chin on my knee. She was warm. Thank you, Button. Her tail wagged. I looked up at the sky. The sun was setting. Orange melting into purple. It was beautiful. I had been thrown away. Cast out. Lost everything. And still, the sky was beautiful. And Button was beside me. On New Year's Day, I watched the sunrise from a park bench. People walked past, greeting each other with Happy New Year. None of them were talking to me. I just sat there, and Button dozed on my lap. It's a new year, Button. Her ears twitched, and she closed her eyes again. I stroked her head and made my resolutions for the year. Nothing grand. 1. Don't freeze to death. 2. Don't starve to death. 3. Keep Button safe. That was all. If I could manage those 3 things, I'd call it a success. January was the coldest month. Some nights dropped to -15 Celsius. On those nights, I walked until morning. If I stayed still, I'd freeze solid. I held Button against my chest and paced the alleys behind the shops. Until the sun came up. When it got truly unbearable, I went to a J. Jim Jilbang, a public bathhouse. The J. Jim Jilbang cost 5,000 won. Expensive. But on nights when I thought I might die, I had no choice. I smuggled Button in inside my bag. Terrified the whole time that we'd be caught and thrown out. We never were. Button was always quiet. I warmed up, showered, and slept. That's how I survived the worst of the cold. I went to the J. Jim Jilbang 4 times in January. 20,001. It hurt to spend it, but it kept me alive. February was easier. Daytime temperatures started climbing above freezing. And the nights weren't quite as brutal. I could stay in the alley again. 2 layers of cardboard on the ground, Button in my arms. My jacket pulled over us both and I'd make it to morning. That's when I started looking for work. My money was running out. I had about 300,000 left of the original 500,000. At this rate, I wouldn't last 3 more months. I asked around at the market. Do you have any work? I'll do anything. Most of them shook their heads. Sorry, nothing. Business has been slow. You're a bit old for heavy labor, aren't you? They sounded concerned, but no one offered me a job. I understood. Who would hire a 72-year-old woman? Young people couldn't find work either. But I didn't give up. Every day I walked through the market, asking everyone. Cleaning, carrying boxes, anything I said I'd do it all. A month passed, and still no one had work for me. Then one afternoon, something happened. There was a junk shop at the far end of the market. I was passing by when I saw a man struggling with a heavy box. He looked about 60, and his face was twisted in pain. Something wrong with his back, maybe. I stopped. I wasn't sure whether to offer help. I might seem strange, or he might turn me down and I'd feel foolish. But he looked like he was really hurting. Do you need a hand? He looked at me, up and down. Then he tilted his head. It's all right. This is heavy. I can lift it. I stepped forward and grabbed one end of the box. He hesitated, then let go. It was heavier than I'd expected, but I managed. Together, we carried it inside. Thank you. He straightened his back as he said it. It was nothing. I turned to leave, then stopped. I made myself ask, do you need any help around here? I'll do anything. He looked at me for a long time. Then he asked, where do you live? I couldn't answer. No home, then. He sighed. I lowered my head. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. I started to walk away, but he called after me. Wait. I stopped. I do have some work. Not much, though. Carrying things now and then, sorting, that kind of thing. Not enough to pay a daily wage, but if I call when I need you, can you come? I nodded. Yes. Anytime. Then give me your number. I hesitated. I didn't have a phone. I don't have one. He thought for a moment. All right. Come by every morning. If there's work, I'll let you know. If there isn't, you can go. Thank you. I bowed deeply. He waved me off. Don't thank me yet. I don't even know if there'll be any work. But I was grateful anyway. Someone had looked at me and seen a person who could be useful. That meant everything. His name was Mr. Kim Jung-ho. Everyone called him Mr. Kim because he owned the junk shop. He ran it alone, and his bad back meant he couldn't lift anything heavy. That's why he needed me. Every morning, I went to the junk shop. Some days there was work. Some days there wasn't. When there was, I carried things, sorted scrap metal, swept up. Each time, I got 20,000 won. It wasn't much, but I'd earned it. Not begged for it, earned it. That made all the difference. The same 20,000 won felt completely different when I'd worked for it. My back hurt, my legs ached, but getting paid for my labor felt good. It made me feel human. Mr. Kim wasn't much of a talker. He said only what was necessary. No jokes, hardly any change of expression. But he wasn't a bad man. When work was done, he'd give me a cup of coffee. When it rained, he'd tell me to wait under the awning. One day, after finishing a job and collecting my pay, Mr. Kim pointed at my bag. What's in there? I froze. Button was inside. A dog. I told him the truth. No point trying to hide it, he'd find out eventually. He peered into the bag. Button poked her head out and sniffed. Small one. Yes. What's its name? Button. He looked at Button for a while, then nodded. Cute. That was all. He didn't ask anything else, didn't tell me to get rid of her. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. After that, I stopped hiding Button. When I came to the shop, I'd take her out of the bag and let her sit in the corner. She'd watch me work quietly. Sometimes Mr. Kim would reach down and pet her head. This one's got a gentle temperament. Button would wag her tail. Mr. Kim almost smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile. March came, and the weather began to warm. Some days I didn't need my jacket anymore. The nights grew milder too. I started sleeping on a park bench instead of the alley. The bench was more comfortable than cardboard. Work at the junk shop came 2 or 3 times a week. About 200,000 won a month. With vegetables from the market and scraps from the butcher. I barely spent anything. My savings stopped shrinking, they even stayed level. The market vendors started recognizing me. "Ah, you work at the junk shop, don't you?" "Yes, hello. I've got some cabbage left over, want it?" "Thank you." I wasn't just a homeless woman anymore. I was the woman who works at the junk shop. People treated me differently. They used to look at me with pity. Now they treated me like a neighbor. I changed too. I didn't lower my head as much. My voice got stronger. I said, "Thank you," and "hello," more often. I could meet people's eyes again. It was because of Button. With Button around, people talked to me. "Oh, what a cute dog. What's her name? How old is she?" I had to answer, and answers turned into conversations. Without Button, I would have stayed invisible. April came, and the cherry blossoms bloomed. There were 3 cherry trees in the park. Pink petals covered the branches. I sat on the bench and looked at them. Button was asleep on my lap. "Button, look how pretty." She opened one eye, then closed it. She didn't seem interested in flowers. People came to take photos. Young people, families, couples. Everyone was smiling, posing under the blossoms. I watched them and thought of last spring. Last spring, I'd seen the cherry blossoms from my son's balcony. There was a tree in the apartment complex, visible through the window. My daughter-in-law made coffee. I drank it and watched the petals fall. Back then, I thought that was normal. Now, nothing was normal. Sitting on this bench, seeing these blossoms, having Button beside me, all of it was something to be grateful for. "Button, let's see the blossoms together next year too." She wagged her tail. I didn't know if she understood, but I took it as a promise. One day in May, Mr. Kim asked me a question. "Mrs. Park, where do you sleep?" I was startled by the name. Mrs. Park. It was the first time anyone had called me that. Before, it was always, "Hey," or "Ma'am." "The park." I answered honestly. Mr. Kim nodded and then said something unexpected. "There's a storage room behind the shop. It's small, but it keeps the rain out. You can sleep there if you want." I stared at him. "Are you sure? If you don't want to, forget it." "No thank you. Thank you so much." I bowed deeply. He waved a hand. "There's one condition." "Yes?" "Sweep the front of the shop every morning. That'll cover the rent." I nodded. "I can do that." "Then start tonight." He handed me the key to the storage room. It was old and rusted, but it felt heavy in my hand. The room was tiny. About 2 pyong, barely big enough to lie down. Old shelves lined the walls, and empty boxes were stacked everywhere. I cleaned it out and cleared a space just big enough for one person. The floor was concrete, but with cardboard underneath, I could manage. That night, I slept in the storage room. There was a roof over my head. There was a door and a lock. The wind didn't get in. Even if it rained, I wouldn't get wet. Button lay beside me, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept so comfortably. "Button, we have a home now." She wagged her tail. "It's small, but it's ours." I looked up at the ceiling. It was cracked and stained, but that night, it was the most beautiful ceiling I'd ever seen. With the storage room, everything changed. Every morning I woke up, swept the front of the junk shop. Then walked to the market for vegetables. I'd come back, feed Button, and if there was work in the afternoon, I'd do it. If not, I'd rest in the park. It was a routine. That was only possible because I had somewhere to go back to. No matter how small, no matter how shabby, having a place to return to changed everything. I didn't have to worry about where I'd sleep. I didn't have to fear the rain. My health improved too. My knees hurt less. My cough faded. Sleeping somewhere warm meant sleeping well, and sleeping well meant having energy during the day. People said I looked better. Mrs. Park, your face looks brighter these days. The vegetable vendor told me that. Does it? Yes, you used to look so tired. I smiled. I've been sleeping well. That's what matters. Sleep and eat well, that's all there is to it. She handed me a few carrots. I thanked her and put them in my bag. It's nothing, I was going to throw them out anyway. She waved me off. But I knew the truth. Those carrots weren't anywhere near spoiled. She'd given them to me on purpose. The market people started looking out for me. The butcher still gave me scraps. The fish seller gave me what didn't sell. The fruit vendor gave me bruised apples and pears. The tofu shop gave me broken pieces. Is this really okay? It's too much. Take it. I'd just throw it away. That's what they all said. But I knew better. If they'd wanted to throw it away, they would have done it already. They'd saved it for me. I was grateful. But I didn't want to just take without giving anything back. So I started sweeping the market alleys. No one asked me to. Every morning after sweeping the junk shop, I swept the market streets too. Leaves, trash, scraps of cardboard, I gathered it all and threw it away. It took about 30 minutes. That much I could do. At first, no one noticed. But after a few days, the vendors caught on. Who swept up here? Mrs. Park did. Oh, the woman from the junk shop? That's right. I overheard that conversation from a distance. My face flushed. I hadn't done it for praise, but knowing that someone noticed made me feel embarrassed somehow. The next day, the vegetable vendor called me over. Mrs. Park, come here a moment. I walked over, and she handed me an envelope. What's this? From the Merchants Association. They wanted to thank you for the cleaning. Inside the envelope was money. I counted it 100,001. I can't take this. I handed it back. Her eyes went wide. Why not? I swept because I wanted to give something back. If I take money, it defeats the purpose. She stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. Stubborn, aren't you? I'm sorry. No, it's a good kind of stubborn. All right, forget the money. She tucked the envelope back into her apron pocket. But let me buy you a meal. You can't say no to that. I hesitated, then nodded. That I can accept. At lunch, I ate kalguksu at a noodle shop inside the market. The vendor paid. Steam rose from the bowl of knife-cut noodles. I took the first bite and felt tears welling up. The broth was warm. Is it good? She asked. It's delicious. Eat plenty. I finished every drop. I even gave Button a few strands of noodles. She slurped them up noisily. Your dog eats well too. She laughed. So did I. That night, lying in the storage room, I thought about things. I had believed I was thrown away. But I'd been picked up again. My son had thrown me out, but other people had picked me up. Mr. Kim, the women at the market, the butcher. They'd gathered me in and made me a person again. Button was snoring beside me. Thank you, Button. I stroked her head. I couldn't have made it this far without you. Her tail wagged in her sleep. I closed my eyes. Moonlight crept through a crack in the ceiling. Somewhere far off, I heard crickets. It was peaceful. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this peace. I fell asleep, with Button beside me, in a tiny storage room, inside a small but certain peace. It happened in early June. The rainy season hadn't started yet, but the air was thick and humid. I woke at 5 in the morning, swept the front of the junk shop. Then swept the market alleys. I liked to finish before the sun got too high. After cleaning, I took Button for a walk. We did a lap around the park, then headed toward the market. The shops weren't open yet, so the streets were quiet. I walked slowly, and Button trotted at my feet, sniffing at everything. We were passing through the alley behind the shops when Button stopped. She froze, ears pricked, staring hard at something ahead. I stopped too and followed her gaze. What is it, Button? She started whimpering. Then she grabbed the hem of my pants with her teeth and tugged. She wanted me to follow. All right, I'm coming. I followed her. At the far end of the alley, next to a trash bin, something was lying on the ground. At first I thought it was a garbage bag. But when I got closer, I saw it was a person. A man, collapsed on the ground. He looked about 60. His face was pale, and he was drenched in cold sweat. His eyes were half closed, and his breathing was shallow and fast. Sir? Are you all right? No answer. I bent down and looked at his face. His lips were blue. Sir. His eyes opened. They were unfocused, and he tried to say something, but no sound came out. I looked around. No one else was there. It was too early, the shops were still closed, and no one was walking by. Hold on. I'll call for help. I ran to find a payphone. There was one at the entrance of the market. I put in some coins and dialed 119. Hello, someone's collapsed. The alley behind Junggong Market. Please come quickly. I hung up and ran back. The man was still lying there. Button was standing next to him, keeping watch. Help is coming. Just hold on a little longer. I crouched beside him. I didn't know what to do. I remembered something from television. I turned him onto his side so he wouldn't choke. Then I took off my cardigan and spread it over him. It's going to be okay. They'll be here soon. He grabbed my hand. His grip was weak, but he held on tight. I held his hand back. About 10 minutes later, I heard sirens. The paramedics rushed over and lifted him onto a stretcher. I stood aside and watched. Are you family? One of the paramedics asked. No, I was just passing by. I found him. Can you leave a contact number? The police might need to follow up. I hesitated. I didn't have a phone. I don't have one. The paramedic looked at me strangely for a moment, but didn't press further. All right. Good thing you found him when you did. A little longer and it could have been serious. What happened to him? Looks like hypoglycemic shock. Probably diabetic. Might have skipped breakfast. The ambulance drove off. I stood there listening to the siren fade into the distance. Button was at my feet, looking up at me. You found him, Button. She wagged her tail. Good girl. I picked her up. She licked my face. I thought that was the end of it. A week later, I was working at the junk shop, when a stranger came looking for me. A woman, maybe in her 50s. Neatly dressed and carrying something in her hands. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Park Jung-gim? I was surprised. No one knew my name. Yes, but how did you? You saved my father. I came to thank you. I didn't understand at first. Her father? Then I remembered what had happened a week ago. Oh, the man from that morning? Yes. He's diabetic. That day, he took his insulin but didn't eat breakfast. He collapsed during his walk. Is he all right now? Yes, thanks to you. They said if he'd been found any later, it could have been very bad. She bowed deeply. I waved my hand, flustered. No, I just happened to be walking by. But you called 119. You stayed with him. He remembers you holding his hand. I didn't know what to say. It had seemed like the obvious thing to do. I didn't feel like I deserved thanks. She held out the bag she'd been carrying. What's this? Fruit. My father asked me to bring it. That's very kind, but I really can't. Please accept it. He wanted to come himself, but he's still not well enough to walk far. So he sent me instead. I took the fruit. Apples and pears. Thank you. No, thank you. She bowed again. Then she hesitated, as if there was more she wanted to say. May I ask you something? Of course. Do you work here? I nodded. Sometimes. Carrying things, cleaning up. She nodded slowly and then took out a business card. We're looking for someone at our shop. If you're interested, please get in touch. I looked at the card. It said, Happy Banchan Shop, with an address 2 bus stops from the market. A side dish shop? Yes, it's small. My father used to run it, but he can't anymore, so I've taken over. It's hard to manage alone. I stood there holding the card. She was offering me a job. But I couldn't answer right away. Think about it. No pressure. She smiled and left. I told Mr. Kim about it. Someone offered me a job. He nodded. I know. That woman from earlier. Would it be all right if I went? He looked at me. Why wouldn't it be? Because I have work here. There's not much work here. You'd be better off there, with real hours. My chest tightened. I was grateful that he wasn't trying to hold me back. Letting go was its own kind of kindness. Thank you, Mr. Kim. Don't mention it, but come by now and then. I'll still need help lifting heavy things. He smiled. So did I. The next day, I went to Happy Banchan shop. It was a small place. A glass display case filled with side dishes, a kitchen in the back. It smelled good doenjang stew, stir-fried anchovies, roasted seaweed. The woman greeted me warmly. Her name was Lee Sujin. You came. Have a look around. I looked around the shop. It was tidy, and there were plenty of side dishes. But there weren't many customers. What would I be doing? I'll handle the cooking. I need help with prep, packing, cleaning, deliveries, things like that. I can't cook. That's fine. I'll do the cooking. Sujin smiled. There's one thing I should tell you, though. What's that? I can't pay much. The shop is small. About 800,000 won a month. Is that okay? I nodded. 800,000 was plenty. I'd been living on 200,000. That's fine. And one more thing. She paused, then continued. There's a small room behind the shop. It used to be a storeroom, but if we clear it out, someone could live there. You could stay and work here. I won't charge rent. I stared at her. Why would you do all this for me? Her expression softened. You saved my father. But that was just anyone would have done the same. Not to me. Her eyes grew wet. My father lives alone. My mother passed away years ago, and I live far away, so I can't visit often. That day, no one knew he'd gone out for a walk. No one saw him collapse. But you found him. I couldn't say anything, so I'm grateful. It might have seemed ordinary to you, but to me, it was my father's life. I thought it over. Taking a free room felt uncomfortable. But refusing felt like I'd be rejecting her kindness. Let me work off the rent instead. I said, I'll clean the shop every morning and evening. And I'll do as many deliveries as I can. Would that be enough? Sujin thought for a moment, then nodded. That works. And one more thing. Yes? I have a dog. A small one. Would it be all right if she stayed with me? Sujin smiled. The dog that was with my father that day? He told me about her. A little dog standing guard. She was the one who found him. I just followed. Of course she can stay. I should be thanking her too. So I started working at Happy Banchan shop. We cleared out the storeroom and made it into a room. It was a bit bigger than the one at the junk shop, and it had a window. I brought in a small table and some bedding, and it became home. There was a bathroom in the shop and a place to shower. The first night, I lay in that room with Button. Street light filtered through the window. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played. I lay there thinking. 6 months ago, I had been thrown out in my slippers. I had nothing. No phone, no wallet, nowhere to go. Now, things were different. I had a room. I had a job. I had a salary. I had people around me. And I had Button. Button. She looked up at me. I think we're going to be okay. She wagged her tail. I pulled her close and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. I wasn't afraid. I was even a little excited. In 72 years, this was the first time I'd looked forward to tomorrow. 3 months passed at Happy Banchan shop. Summer faded into autumn. The mornings and evenings grew cool. And the ginkgo tree in front of the shop turned golden. Every day I woke at 6. swept the front of the shop, and prepared for deliveries. When Sujin arrived at 7, we'd start making side dishes together. The work came naturally now. At first, I was slow at chopping vegetables. But after 3 months, I'd gotten faster. Dicing radish for kakdugi, trimming bean sprouts, blanching spinach. Sujin taught me, and I learned. She started giving me compliments. "Mrs. Park, you've really improved." "Have I?" "Much better than when you started. I can trust you with things now." That made me happy. Being recognized, being useful, I hadn't known how good that could feel. Button settled into the shop too. I set up a cushion for her in the corner. And she spent most of the day dozing there. When customers came in, she'd wag her tail. When children reached out to pet her, she'd hold still and let them. The customers loved her. "Oh, what a cute dog. What's her name?" "Button." "Because of her eyes? They look like buttons." "Yes." That conversation happened several times a day. Button had become the shop's mascot. Sujin's father visited sometimes. After that morning, his health had mostly recovered. But he'd stop by now and then, just to take a walk. His name was Lee Chang-ho. He was 6 years younger than me, quiet and dignified. "Hard at work again, Mrs. Park. You're the one coming in every day, Mr. Lee. I worry about my daughter doing this alone." Mr. Lee was especially fond of Button. Every time he came, he'd pet her head and give her treats. Button loved him too. Whenever he appeared, she'd wag her tail and run to greet him. "This little one saved my life, you know." He said that sometimes. When I collapsed, she was right there beside me. Waiting until Mrs. Park came, I'd wave my hand. "Button found you first. I just followed her. But you followed. That's what mattered." He'd smile. So would I. Days passed peacefully like that. I woke up, worked, walked Button in the evening, and slept in my small room at night. Nothing extraordinary happened, and that was fine. Ordinary days, stacked one on top of another, that's what makes a life. Then, one afternoon in mid-October, it happened. It was around 3 o'clock, a quiet time with no customers. I was trimming cabbage, and Sujin was stir-frying something at the stove. Button was napping on her cushion. The door opened. I looked up to greet whoever it was and froze. The faces were familiar. My son was standing there. Hyunho. And beside him, my daughter-in-law. I set down the cabbage. My heart pounded, but I tried not to let it show. "Mother." Hyunho spoke. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in a year. "Why are you here?" I kept my voice calm. Hyunho hesitated before answering. "We need to talk." Sujin noticed something was wrong. She quietly untied her apron. "Mrs. Park, I'll step out for a bit." "No, it's fine. Actually, I need to run to the bank anyway." She grabbed her bag and left. She was giving us space. I was grateful. Now it was just me, Hyunho, and his wife. Button woke and lifted her head. When she saw Hyunho, she growled. I'd never heard her do that before. "Button." She came to stand behind me but kept her eyes on Hyunho, still on edge. "So you're working here?" my daughter-in-law asked. The same tone as a year ago, polite words, no respect. "Yes. Good for you. We thought you might have died." I didn't respond. I knew what "thought you might have died" really meant. It meant they hadn't bothered to look. "What do you want?" I asked my son directly. He glanced at his wife, then spoke. "We need money." Of course. I'd expected it, but hearing it still felt hollow. "How much?" 30 million won. I almost laughed. 30 million won. I didn't make 10 million in a year, and they wanted 30. "I don't have it." "What do you mean? You work here, don't you?" My daughter-in-law cut in. "Even if I saved every one I earned, I wouldn't have that kind of money." "Then take out a loan. You could borrow against your name." I looked at her. I remembered the hand that had pushed me out the door a year ago. "No. Why not?" I said no. Her face hardened. Hyunho stepped forward. Mom, we're in real trouble. The business isn't doing well. We have debts to pay. Business? Yes. We started something last year, but it's not going well. I understood. They'd taken out loans against the apartment, started a business, and failed. That's why they'd come to find me. They needed money. I can't help you, Mom. Hyunho raised his voice. Button started barking. I picked her up. Lower your voice. This is my workplace. Hyunho paused, then tried again. Mom, I'm your son. Is it really so hard to lend your son some money? I looked at him. My son, now in his mid-40s. Stomach grown soft, hairline receding. The boy I'd given birth to and raised. Do you remember what you said to me last year? He didn't answer. You didn't say anything. Your wife pushed me out the door, and you sat on the sofa with your head down. The situation was. What situation? Your mother was being thrown out in slippers, and you just stared at the floor. I said it calmly. I wasn't angry anymore. A year ago, I would have been. No, I was just stating facts. It was December. -10 degrees. I was in my pajamas. Your wife gave me an old jacket and 500,000 won. I lived on that for a year. Hyunho lowered his head. Just like that day. But you're not going to ask me to forgive you, are you? He looked up. Our eyes met. Can you forgive me? No. I said it firmly. I won't forgive you. And I never will. What you did isn't something that deserves forgiveness. His face crumpled. My daughter-in-law jumped in. That's too harsh, don't you think? He's apologizing to you. Apologizing? He came here asking for money. That's not an apology. She seemed at a loss for words. No contact for a year, and the moment you need money, you show up. Is that what an apology looks like? But we're family. Family? I laughed. A bitter laugh. Family is why I gave you the apartment. Family is why I paid the gift tax. Family is why I spent 5 years tiptoeing around your house. And what did I get in return? She didn't answer. Nothing. No home, no money, no family. That's what you left me with. I set Button down and reached into my apron pocket. I pulled out a piece of paper, one I carried with me always. Do you know what this is? Hyunho and his wife looked at it. This is the agreement you signed 5 years ago. I will allow my mother to live in this home until she passes away. Your signature and your seal are right here. Hyunho's face went white. I showed this to a lawyer. She said I could sue for damages, violation of residency rights. And the gift could be revoked, since it was conditional. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. I haven't done anything yet because I didn't care enough. I had no interest in how you were living. But now that you've come here asking for money, I'm reconsidering. Hyunho opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Leave, and don't come back. If you do, the next contact will be through my lawyer. My daughter-in-law flared up. Are you threatening us? No, I'm telling you what's going to happen. I looked at her. I didn't look away. When you threw me out last year, you didn't think of it as a threat, did you? Neither do I. I'm just letting you know what comes next. She bit her lip. Hyunho grabbed her arm. Let's go. What? I said let's go. He pulled her toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped and looked back at me. Mom. What? I really am sorry. I didn't answer. He pushed open the door and left. She followed. The door swung shut. I sank into a chair. My legs were trembling. I'd spoken calmly, but inside, I'd been anything but calm. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. Button climbed into my lap. Button. She licked my face. I did the right thing, didn't I? She wagged her tail. I held her for a long time. When Sujin came back, I was trimming cabbage again. She asked carefully, Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine. Who was that? Someone from the past. I didn't say more, and she didn't ask. She just stood beside me and got back to work. That evening, after we closed the shop, I went back to my room. A small room, streetlight glowing through the window, Button lying beside me. I stared at the ceiling and thought. I had decided not to forgive. I never would. Some people say forgiveness is for yourself, not the other person. I didn't agree. Some things shouldn't be forgiven. If you forgive everything, then nothing matters. What they did to me was not okay. So I wouldn't forgive, but I wouldn't hate them either. Hating takes energy. I didn't want to waste what I had left on hating Hyunho. I'd just lie as if he didn't exist. Button, it's really over now. She wagged her tail. From now on, it's just us. I pulled her close and shut my eyes. I felt lighter, like I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying without realizing it. Outside, the wind was blowing. An autumn wind. Leaves rustling, a faint radio playing somewhere. Peace. That night, I slept deeply. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dream. Button started slowing down that winter. On our walks, she no longer ran ahead like she used to. She walked slowly and tired quickly, stopping to rest. She ate less than before. She slept more. Button, are you feeling all right? She looked up at me. Her tail wagged, but it didn't have the same energy. Soojin told me about a veterinary clinic 3 bus stops away. I carried Button there in my arms. The vet examined her, a young woman who handled Button gently. After running a few tests, she sat me down. She's quite old. How old? Hard to say exactly, but I'd guess at least 10. That's getting up there for a small dog. I looked at Button. She hadn't been a puppy when I found her. She'd already been several years old then. Is she very sick? There's nothing specifically wrong. It's just age. Her heart is weaker, her joints are stiff, her energy is fading. The vet stroked Button's head. It's the same for people, isn't it? When you get older, your body doesn't work the way it used to. I nodded. I knew that well enough. I was 72. How long does she have? The vet thought before answering. Honestly, I can't say. It could be a few months, could be a year. No one knows for certain. I understand. I carried Button out of the clinic. At the bus stop, waiting for the bus, I looked down at her. She was curled in my arms, eyes closed. That was hard, wasn't it, Button? She opened her eyes for a moment, then closed them again. Let's go home. I got on the bus. Through the window, I watched the winter scenery pass by. Bare branches, gray sky, people bundled in coats. It reminded me of the winter a year ago. I'd been shivering in an alley then, and that's when I found Button. 1 year. That's how long we'd been together. Short, in a way. Long, in another. After that, I took better care of her. I fed her smaller amounts more often. I kept our walks short. At night, I added an extra layer of blanket. I did everything I could to make her comfortable. Button stayed by my side. Slower now, but still there. Every morning when I woke, she wagged her tail. Every evening when I came back to the room, she was waiting by the door. That was enough. Spring came. Cherry blossoms bloomed in the park. I remembered the promise I'd made the year before that. We'd see the blossoms together again. Let's go see the flowers, Button. I carried her to the park and sat on a bench. Pink petals drifted in the breeze. Button rested on my lap, half asleep. Isn't it beautiful? She opened her eyes. I couldn't tell if she was looking at the blossoms or just looking. But I chose to believe she saw them. Last year, I promised we'd see this together. She wagged her tail. Let's do it again next year. I said it, but somewhere in my heart, I knew. Next year might not come. Summer passed. Autumn arrived. Button slowed down even more. Walking was hard for her now. We barely went on walks anymore. She spent most of the day lying on her cushion, and she only picked at her food. One day in October, she stopped eating altogether. I put food right under her nose, but she turned her head away. She drank only a little water. I carried her to the vet. After the examination, the vet spoke carefully. She's very tired now. How long? A few days. Maybe a week. I looked at Button. She looked back at me. Her eyes were cloudy, but I thought she still recognized me. Is she in pain? Not right now. She's just weak. But later, it might become difficult. When that happens, the vet trailed off. I understood what she meant. I understand. I carried Button home. I laid her on her cushion and sat beside her. She closed her eyes. Button. She opened them. Thank you. Her tail moved. Faintly, but it moved. That night, I lay down next to her. I pulled the blanket over us and held her close. I could feel her heartbeat. Small, slow, fragile. Button, what would have happened if I hadn't taken you home that night? She was asleep. She didn't answer. I probably would have died. Frozen, or starved, or just given up. I spoke to the ceiling. But because you were there, I kept going. I had to feed you, keep you warm, make sure you weren't alone. That's why I survived. Button stirred in her sleep. Thank you, Button. Thank you so much. I held her tighter. 3 days passed. Button barely ate, barely drank. She slept most of the time. I took time off from the shop to stay with her. Sujin understood. Take all the time you need. I'll manage. Thank you. Of course. On the morning of the 4th day, I woke up, and Button wasn't moving. She was still breathing, but she wouldn't open her eyes. Button. I called her name, but she didn't respond. Her tail didn't wag. Button, wake up. Slowly, she opened her eyes. She looked at me. Then, with great effort, she wagged her tail once. It's okay. You don't have to get up. I lifted her gently. She was so light, so much lighter than before. I walked to the window. The sun was just rising. The sky was orange. Look, Button. The sun's coming up. She turned her head toward the window. I don't know if she could see it, but she looked that way. I stood there a long time, watching the sunrise. With Button. When the sun had fully risen, I felt her body go slack in my arms. Button? Her eyes were closed. I held my hand near her nose. No breath. Button. No answer. I stood there for a long time. Holding her, in front of the window, in the morning light. I didn't cry. I felt like I should, but the tears wouldn't come. I just stood there, numb. Goodbye, Button. I looked down at her. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful. She hadn't been in pain. That was something. Thank you. For everything. I carried her to her cushion and laid her down. I covered her with her blanket. One last time, I stroked her head. Soft. Her folded ear, her white fur, her small paws. All still there. But she was gone. I sat beside her. I stayed there all morning. In the afternoon, Sujin came. She knocked, and when I didn't answer, she used her key. Mrs. Park? She stepped inside and saw what had happened. Button. Yes. I answered. Sujin sat down next to me. When? This morning. When the sun came up. She didn't say anything. She just sat with me. I was grateful for that. We buried Button in the park. I asked the groundskeeper if I could, and he looked the other way. We found a quiet spot in the corner and dug a small hole. It was against the rules, but he let us do it anyway. Was she your dog? Yes. How long did you have her? 2 years. You must have loved her. I nodded. We covered the hole and placed a stone on top. A marker. Rest well, Button. I stood there for a long time. The sun was setting. The sky was orange, the same color as when she'd left that morning. I walked home. The room was empty. Button's cushion, her bowl, her blanket, everything was still there. Only Button was missing. I sat on the cushion. I did nothing. Just sat. That night, I couldn't sleep. Without Button next to me, it felt strange. For 2 years, she'd been there every night. Now there was only empty space. Moonlight came through the window. I stared at the ceiling and thought, did Button have a good life? She'd been abandoned, left shivering in an alley. Then she found me, or I found her, and we spent 2 years together. She passed away in the morning light, in my arms. Was that a good life? I decided to believe it was. I had to. 3 months had passed since then. Winter ended. Spring came again. The cherry blossoms bloomed in the park. And I went to visit the spot where Button was buried. Petals had fallen on the stone. Button, the flowers are here. I spoke aloud, to no one. No one answered, but that was all right. I kept working at the shop. Every morning, I woke up, cleaned, helped make side dishes, made deliveries. The days went by without Button. The sun rose, the sun set, and it rose again. Sujin asked me sometimes, "Are you doing okay, Mrs. Park?" "Yes, I'm fine." It wasn't a lie. I was sad, but I wasn't falling apart. Button was gone, but what she'd left behind remained. The people at the market were still there. Mr. Kim, the vegetable vendor, the butcher. They still greeted me, still looked out for me. "You're looking well today, Mrs. Park." "Thanks to all of you." Sujin and Mr. Lee were still there. They were like family now. Not by blood, but by choice. We ate together, laughed together, spent time together. That was what Button had left behind. Because of her, I'd kept going. Because I'd kept going, I'd met people. Because I'd met people, I had a life. Without Button, none of that would have existed. One evening, Mr. Lee stopped by the shop. It was closing time. Sujin had already left, and I was tidying up alone. He sat down and asked if I wanted to have tea. "That sounds nice." I made 2 cups of barley tea. We sat across from each other and drank. "You must miss Button," he said. "I do. So do I. That little one saved my life." He looked out the window. "When I collapsed that morning, she was there. Waiting beside me until you came. That tiny thing, standing guard." I nodded. Button was like that. She stayed close. That's what she did. She was a good one. Yes. We drank our tea in silence for a while. The sun was setting, and the shop glowed orange. "Mrs. Park." "Yes. You've lived well." I didn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean? You've been through so much. Your own child turned you out. You were living on the street. But you didn't give up. You made it here. That's living well." I didn't know what to say. I want to live like that. No matter what happens, don't quit. Keep going to the end. Isn't that what life is? He smiled as he said it. "You've got a lot of years left. Live them well, Mrs. Park." I nodded. "I will." That night, lying in my room, I thought about things. I had turned 73. A year had passed. This time last year, I'd had nothing. No home, no money, no people. I'd been thrown out in my slippers, sleeping on park benches. Now, things were different. I had a small room. I had work. I had people. Button was gone, but what she'd given me was still here. That's what life is. You lose some things. You gain others. Some things leave. Some things stay. You can't have everything, but you don't lose everything either. I opened the window. A night breeze drifted in. Cool and gentle. Somewhere far off, a radio played. In the distance, a dog barked. Button. I looked up at the sky. A few stars were out. "I'm doing okay." No answer came. But the wind blew, and that was enough. I closed the window and got into bed. Button wasn't beside me anymore. But the space where she used to sleep was still there. I ran my hand over it. "Good night, Button." I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again. I'd get up, clean, help make side dishes, talk to people. Another day would pass, and then another. That's what living is. Nothing grand. Just getting through today, then meeting tomorrow. That's all it is. That's how I'll keep living. The way Button stayed beside me, I'll stay beside my own life. Until the end. If today's story brought you even a little comfort, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and turning on notifications. It truly means a lot. And if you leave a warm greeting in the comments. I sincerely wish that good fortune will always be with you. Thank you.